This is Shannon Odenweller reporting live and real about how a news program is put together. Of course, it all begins with me, the reporter. Okay. Some stories come from a wire service for big worldwide and international stories. Local stations can't afford to send a reporter to every story in the world. At least that's what my news director told me when I wanted to cover a story in Paris. But anyways, news organizations share the global stories with the smaller local stations. Our news director back at the station decides which local stories will be covered and sends out a reporter. Sometimes covering these stories can be hard, especially if the news is tragic or it involves a serious crime or accident. But we have to cover the stories that affect the people in the community. There's a lot of competition, too. I may not be the only reporter at the scene, so I have to think of ways to make it look really different and unique. After that, I go back to the station, write the story, and give it to my news director. The news director is the person that decides which stories will... All right, very funny joke. Okay, I get it. Open up. I'm telling...
The news director may be the single most important person in deciding what makes it to air. Today we're talking with Greg Easterly, who is the news director at WJW Fox 8 in Cleveland. What are some of your responsibilities as news director?
I'm responsible for what goes on our air. I'm responsible for 7 hours of news each and every day. And at the end of the day, what goes on, I'm responsible for.
If viewers have complaints, do they come to you with those?
Many of them do. You try to handle complaints at the source. If there's a problem with a report, we try to let the reporters answer some of the questions. But if viewers have questions or problems, many times it'll come to me.
How do you decide what gets on the air?
There are a couple of things. You decide, you air stories because they're important and people need to know about them. And you also air stories that you think people want to see and watch. We're in the ratings business, and we do stories with ratings in mind, but we also have a responsibility as journalists to do stories that inform people and educate people about the events that are going on in Cleveland and Ohio and even the country, all over the country and the world.
What are some of the challenges you face as news director?
Budgets and ratings. That's a real challenge, but also it's a very competitive business. A few years ago, you had 3 stations doing news. Now you have 4 stations doing news, 3 cable outlets doing news, CNN, CNBC, Fox News Channel, and there's a lot more choices for viewers, so you just really have to make yourself very local if you're going to win the news game in Cleveland.
So it is the news director's job to decide which content will make it on the air. He or she not only decides which stories will air, but also the best way to do it.
Oh, hello again. Besides the news director, who's going to hear about a certain practical joke, there is the producer of the news program. You may not see the producer, but he or she decides how the story will look before it gets on the air, like where it will be placed in the program and who will tell it. Sometimes it's even the reporter who will give the story. If the reporter can get back to the station, that is, they want the story to look as professional as possible.
As viewers, we are most familiar with the people who bring us the news, but there are many people who work behind the scenes to make it all happen. One of these people is the producer. What they do directly influences the finished product we see on air. Deanna Phelps is a producer for WJW Fox 8 in Cleveland. Deanna, it sounds like being a producer is a pretty big responsibility. Would you say it's kind of like being the boss of the news?
I wouldn't like to call myself the boss. I'd say I'm the leader of the team. I'm the coach.
How long does it take to put together one newscast?
Well, I start my day at 9 a.m. with the morning story meeting, and it ends when the show goes off the air at 5:58.
How many people are there in your team that put together the news?
Oh, wow. I've never really tried to count, but in our morning story meeting, the conference room is packed. You know, there's myself, there's a 6 o'clock producer, we have an executive producer, our news director, our assistant news director, our managing editor, our assignment desk person, our reporters. And that's just the first meeting of the day. So it's a large team.
How do you decide which stories make it on the news broadcast?
First of all, you have to think about what is really relevant to your audience. The national, international stories are obviously very important, but you also want to balance that with local news and things that impact people's lives day to day. You know, it may not be earth-shattering, but, something that happened on a local soccer field may have, some impact and some interest for local viewers.
So a producer is the person who decides how a news story is presented. And how a news story is presented affects how the viewer is going to feel about it. It would be very boring if someone stood in an empty room and read us the news. A producer is very important. The producer is the one who makes the difference.
Hello, and welcome to the anchor position. A real anchor person usually isn't in the field like this. They send the hard-working reporters like me out to get the stories, and they read them on the air. Some people think an anchor's job is very glamorous, but it's a lot of work. Anchors have to do a lot of background work, and they have to have the respect of the audience. Respect! That's all I want. Is that too much to ask?
Sitting behind the news desk is the team that most of us are familiar with, the anchors. This is a good term because they are the ones who are at the center of the news. They hold everything together. Today we're speaking with Wayne Dawson, who is an anchor for WJW Fox 8 in Cleveland. When I see you give the news, Wayne, I notice you have scripts in front of you, but you're looking right into the camera. How does this work?
Well, those notes, and we call it a script, they're basically a backup. We have something called the teleprompter that is attached right to the lens of the camera, so you can look right into the camera and the words are right there.
Your main responsibility as an anchor is to present the news, but what are some of the other responsibilities you have?
Well, as an anchor, your number one responsibility, as you said, is presenting the news. But also, too, we're called on to write every now and then. For instance, if we get some wire copy or some news of a national nature, we'll rewrite the wire copy and present it as well. Oftentimes, we write something we call teases. That's like coming up next on Fox 8 News. We'll write those things. But basically, it's presenting the news.
Usually the anchors work in a team. What do you like about this?
First of all, you don't have to read so much. When you're by yourself, you have to read a lot more copy, and every now and then your mouth gets dry. But it's good to play off someone else, to have someone else to look at, and you kind of play off their energy. I like it much better when you have a co-anchor.
Even though being an anchor might seem like a glamorous job, there's a lot of work that goes into it behind the scenes. Almost all anchors have journalism experience that prepare them to sit behind the desk and provide the viewers with information that is important to them. They use that experience to present the news in ways that are credible and earn the viewer's trust.
So the news director, the producer, and the anchor person are all building blocks to a news program. Of course, I happen to think that the real key person is the reporter. Yes, sirree. I think that the reporter is the key to it all. Hey, wait for me!